Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Azarov's chess channel, and welcome to our Garry Kasparov series. So in this series, we're following Garry Kasparov's life and his chess career, and we're back now in the 1984-1985 World Chess Championship, in which Kasparov was, of course, the challenger. Karpov was the world champion, and after 31 rounds, Karpov had a comfortable 5-point lead. Karpov had 5 winning games and 26 draws. It was really incredible that Kasparov didn't win any of these games. What bothered, I think, Kasparov the most, that he basically didn't have any winning chances. He didn't have so great attacking opportunities like he loves to have, because he was really the attacker. Karpov was the positional player, but it seems to me that Karpov really slowed down his pace, and he played these really weird openings, this really firm, tough openings, and something didn't fit for that in these openings for Garry Kasparov, and he had to change something. He had to change his approach. It's not about that that Kasparov was worse than Karpov, or that he didn't find maybe some great tactics, and that he missed maybe some opportunities. It seems to me that he basically fell into Karpov's opening traps. There weren't so maybe obvious opening traps, but there were really this deep positional opening traps in which you maybe leave a slightly weak pawn, or maybe you leave a slightly weak square, or something, a slightly positional disbalance that you have. And of course, a great positional player like Karpov punished really all of this tiny little weakness that Kasparov had in this 5 winning games, and that's why I think Kasparov had to change his approach. He had to play maybe from move 1 attacking opportunities. He had to really attack. He had to really complicate things, because in that games maybe Karpov wouldn't find good opportunities, because Karpov was maybe a slightly worse tactician than Kasparov. But when it comes to positional understanding in the 1984, maybe 1985, Karpov was slightly better, and that's why he had this comfortable 5-point lead. So let's now skip to the game 32, which was the turning point, maybe even in chess history, because if Karpov would have won this super match, then of course maybe the chess history would be written differently. And that's why I think this game 32 is very important in every chess book, and in every chess book the name of this super match, of this super game, was the turning point of the world championship in 1984-1985. So let's check out now the game. Kasparov played here with the white pieces and opened with the move d4, knight to f6, c4. We have e6, knight to f3. We mentioned it before. This is the so-called counter Nimzo Indian setup. We don't want to play with our knight. Then we risk the spinning ideas. We have b6. Which is now the Queen's Indian defense. And after the move b6, we're relaying again the situation. We're waiting the move knight to c3. Then we're playing maybe here the move bishop to b4. All of these moves, bishop to b7, bishop to b4 with an attack against the potential knight on c3, are basically a battle around the square e4. The square e4 is the main idea of blacks, to get a powerful control of that square on the board. So that's why it's still a good opening for black. We're, as I said, delaying the situation. We're waiting the move knight to c3, and here Kasparov plays the move knight to c3, which is now basically the so-called Kasparov variation of the Queen's Indian, because Kasparov played many times this move knight to c3. In the game, we have bishop to b7, and now a3. Now the spinning idea doesn't work anymore, but at least black has forced a pawn move. We don't want to play so many pawn moves in the opening stage. We want to play first with our minor pieces, playing these pawns that are basically helping us to develop, because we want now play somewhere with the bishop and castling. So we want to have a fast development. So in this setup, at least black is forcing a weakening move here for white. It's the move a3, but still this is normal theory. Nothing went wrong for both sides. The positions equal so far. So d5 played by Karpov. We have c takes d5, here knight to d5. If you take, of course, with the bishop, then you lose a very active bishop. If you take with the pawn immediately, then the problem is, of course, that you're blocking out your bishop on this long diagonal, because this bishop is very powerful and you don't want to do that. So here, after move c takes d5, we have knight to d5. Kasparov plays queen to c2 with preparations to play e4. We want to have a control of the square. As I said, the whole battle is basically around the square e4. Then after the move e4, knight takes c3, b takes c3, and still we have a protection. Black cannot take the pawn here. So in the game knight to d7, we have knight takes d5. If you try bishop to d5, then again you risk this move e4. We would have then a powerful central control with our pawns. These pawns would be very annoying to handle here for black. In the game, e takes d5 was played. The problem is now, again, this positional idea. You see, the bishop is blocked out by its own pawns, and basically we have developed this bishop on this very, very active diagonal, and now the bishop is blocked out. On the other hand, white still has opportunities to get a very nice activity of both of these bishops on both of these diagonals, so that's why Kasparov placed this very active move, bishop to g5. If you try something like a bishop to e7, it's not so good, because then you get bishop takes e7 and you have to take with the king. The king will be then stuck a little bit in the center, so if you take with the queen, then you lose your c7 pawn. That's the problem about this setup of blacks. In the game, f6 was played. Of course, it's an attacking move against the bishop, but still you're weakened again your pawn structure in front of the king a little bit further. So here Kasparov stays again with the bishop on a very active diagonal, plays the move bishop to f4. We're attacking now the c7 pawn, so that's why c5 played by Karpov, and we have now g3. Okay, we could have played also e3, but then you risk maybe a positional traps like c4. You see, after the move c4, this bishop would never find, I think, a good way into the game. You can develop it maybe here to e2, but we would love to play the bishop on d3, where it, of course, controls this diagonal, and then we could create some weaknesses. So here, even if you try to break the position, then black will make simply progress with the move b5. And after maybe something like b takes c4, we don't have even to take with this one. We can now take with the d pawn, and suddenly black could have maybe here a very nice 3 versus 1 situation on the queen side. The bishop is developed, and still we have worries where to go with this bishop. The bishop on e2, I don't think it has a good activity. So that's why a very interesting idea by Kasparov. He played the move g3. He wants to develop this bishop here, and where the bishop could attack at least the weak d5 pawn, because as we said, the bishop on b7 is only used to defend this pawn on d5. So these are, as I said, these tiny little things in the openings in which you could make really positional mistakes. I'm not sure if I would have played, for instance, a move like e3 after move c5, and I, for instance, play e3 against maybe a top grandmaster. I'm sure that I will get crushed maybe after 20 moves in this particular line of the opening, because top grandmasters like Kasparov and Karpov really punished this inaccuracies in the opening. So that's why g3, very, very nice move by Kasparov. So here g6, Karpov wants, of course, also to have a development of the dark square bishop. We have h4, very, very nice move, because one of the main ideas to attack the fianchetto, which is basically now became really a fianchetto after bishop to g7. We want to crack the position with move h5, then maybe h takes g6, and also attacking then indirectly this rook on g8. In the game, queen to e7, we have bishop to g2, and now bishop to g7. Now Kasparov goes all in, h5, and that's, I think, now a huge difference. If you have followed this 5 winning games by Karpov, here I think Kasparov has really great attacking possibility. He has really this position that he loves to see, this attacking dynamic games, really tactics all over the board. So far it's really hard to defend this position, because h5 is really an immediate problem for black here. You could try maybe here queen to e4 to simplify the position, but the problem is now that white doesn't have to trade off the queens. White can play the very active move queen to a4, and for instance, if you try queen to e6, then rook to c8, rook to c1, maybe you could try bishop to c6, but now queen to c2, and we're attacking still this g6. Maybe you could try here the move g5, but now I think this was also part maybe of Garry Kasparov's opening preparation. You don't have to retreat with the bishop. You can play d takes c5, and if you, for instance, take out the bishop, here g takes f4, then we have maybe h6 here. You have to retreat, and then knight to d4, I think, is very, very tricky, because you have to retreat with the queen and your bishop is hanging. Then afterwards your d5 pawn is hanging. I'm really sure that this particular line it wasn't played in the game, but it was, I think, somewhere in Garry Kasparov's opening prep. So that's why after the move h5, queen to e4 wasn't played by Karpov. Queen to e4, you're getting the queen in front of the bishop. You can maybe attack the queen, but still after queen to f4, you saw that you still have to retreat with the queen. So that's why here f5 was played by Karpov. If you try g5 immediately to attack the bishop, then bishop to e3 is perfectly fine. We didn't lose any bishop's activity because now we're attacking also the c5. For instance, if black tries maybe something like g4, still we can take another good square on the board. It's of course h4 where we control, of course, also this weak f5 square. So far, attacking the minor pieces of white is not a possibility here for Karpov. We have f5. Kasparov now occupies really the dark squares on the board. Even if you take here c takes d4, it's not a problem. We can take knight takes d4. We have a very nice centralized knight. We have an isolated pawn, which is now a clear weakness. As I said in the beginning, this d5 was the positional problem in the beginning, and giving up the bishop for a knight is not an option. You have simply too many dark square problems then in the continuation of the game. What we want to do is maybe here to fix the knight with e3. We can also try something like h6, maybe even h takes g5, rook takes h8, rook to c1. I think from this point on, white has a comfortable game. So queen to d2, we're really controlling now the dark squares on the board, very, very important. And we're, I think, also controlling the light squares because we are at least attacking the d5 pawn, and still this bishop is so far out of game. So here, rook to c1, played by Kasparov. We have rook to c8, rook to c3, threatening rook to e3, trapping the queen. So that's why rook to c8, rook to e3. Anyway, we have rook to e3, rook to e6, rook takes e6, and now queen to e6, and now knight to g5, which was a very cool move because if you again take bishop takes g5, bishop takes g5, again, it's obvious that you have this dark square problems. Still, you have also problems with the d5. We can try something like castling, maybe d takes c5, and then rook to d1. Attacking further the d5 weakness. We can try also h6. We can also try h takes g6. Then you have to take with the queen. You cannot anymore connect the pawns here on light squares. There are also some tactical threats on the h file. So it's finally a good game here for Garry Kasparov. He created really great dynamics and great tactical possibilities. So knight to g5. Karpov didn't react. He played queen to e7, and now d takes c5. We have knight to c5. Karpov wants to lock the position with the move knight to e4, but now Kasparov simply plays h takes g6. There is now again the tension on the h file, and we have now d4 liberating this long diagonal, finally getting out of the range of trying to trade off these bishops, and Kasparov simply played g7. He had now provoked at least some kind of weakness. As I said, here after the move bishop to g7, bishop takes b7, knight to queen to b7 was played. So we can notice now that this pawn, and this pawn are really clear weaknesses. So at least in this particular move order and in this particular line, Kasparov has forced some clear weaknesses, clear objects of our attack. Here after the move queen takes b7, here f3, of course locking the long diagonal, and here queen to d5. If you try h6 to protect your h7 pawn, then knight to h3 is not a problem, queen to d5, and we can still maybe play something like knight to f2, maybe king to f1, knight to d3, and still this is a weak pawn, also we can further then maybe take bishop takes h6, bishop takes h6, rook takes h6, and I think again white would have a winning continuation. So after the move f3, we have queen to d5, Kasparov takes, rook takes h7, knight to h7, queen to b3, bishop to d6, attacking the knight, knight to e6, and now knight to g5. Kasparov has grabbed the pawn. He wants now, of course, to go into a favorable endgame. Knight to g5, bishop to h6, bishop to f4. If you try knight to f4, queen to f4 can be played. Queen to b2, it's not a problem because then you risk some checks, and then the knight will come very active into the game. So that's why you will probably lose this game if you go after this pawn. So that's why Karpov played here first. Bishop takes g5, bishop takes g5, knight to g5, again queen to g5. Okay, we can take out now this pawn, but still Kasparov can take also this pawn. Queen to f5, we have some checks, but no perpetuals are possible, so that's the most important thing. Queen to c1, king to g2, and the king is perfectly fine here. Karpov goes for this pawn, but now Kasparov can also take now this pawn, queen to g4, and he has grabbed this pawn. Queen takes d4, b5, and here after the move g4, believe me or not, Anatoly Karpov resigned the game. So, first win for Garry Kasparov in the super match. Let's see a little bit further what could have happened if Karpov would have continued. The problem is, in this types of position, when we have this queen and pawn endgames, is always the king security. And I hope you realize the king of white is perfectly fine. At least black cannot create further checks. So let's see possible continuation. Here b4, maybe g5. Here after move g5, we could here first maybe pardon me, after move b4, we can create another check. Again, maybe a check, and then we're pushing the pawn further. So let's see. Black pushes, white pushes the pawn. We have maybe here b1 the promotion, but also g8 the promotion. And again, we have this problem. Black can never create perpetuals. Black cannot create a check, and the king is still endangered here. I think with this queen activity, black is also risking to get checkmated by both of these queens. So still, as I said, Karpov realized this endgame problems and he resigned the game, which was, I think, also very correct. Correct sort of move by Anatoly Karpov, because when you're on the losing side, it's also good sometimes to resign the game, to be fair. And here Karpov lost now for his first game in the super match against Garry Kasparov. The result is now 5 wins for Anatoly Karpov and 1 win for Garry Kasparov. So okay, incredible stuff what happened back in 1985. We'll see now how this super match went on. If you want to see more of this Garry Kasparov's games, check out my whole list, whole playlist of my Garry Kasparov saga. Here's the link. And if you want to see maybe the best chess games of all times, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.